I bought my first car in 1989. I am that old. It was a 1989 Honda Civic hatchback. And we desperately needed one because our present car that my father-in-law had bought for us had died. Now, I had seen it coming, so I had done all the research, and I had decided what we wanted, and looked up stuff in Consumer Reports, and my first husband, Glenn, he decided it was easier that way because then he didn't have to do any work. Thanks. So, I knew exactly what we wanted. Mileage? High. Accessories? None. No power steering, no power brakes, no power windows, manual transmission, no air conditioning, no radio, and no rust inhibitor underneath the car, please. Thank you very much. Now that no air conditioning part, I figured, I was born and raised in Florida. I figured North Carolina, Durham, it doesn't get hot. Then I realized, I was a professional storyteller then, I realized that there were times when I wanted to appear somewhere not stinking like a pig. We have air conditioning now. Actually, you can't get a car now without air conditioning. So anyway, we went looking. The first place we went to, they didn't really want to have anything to do with us. Why? Because I wanted to buy this car for $6,000, tax, tag, and title included. Isn't that like amazing? $6,000 for a new car? Cars today cost more than my parents paid for their house. So, the first place didn't really want anything to do with us, we left. We went to the second place. This really pushy salesman wanted to sell us the Honda DX, which was a couple of steps above the base model, which is what I wanted. Pushy, pushy, pushy. He kept pushing and saying, well, we don't have the base model, but we do have the DX. Wouldn't you really like that car? It has this. It has that. And he kept mentioning things that I didn't want. What do I want out of a car? I want a car that will stop, go, change direction, all on command for a long time without needing repair. That is my idea of a good car. So this pushy salesman goes and he gets his manager, and his manager is all smiles, and he shakes Glenn's hand and he shakes my hand, and he says, how would you feel if I could sell you a car today and save you money? He sounded like a commercial. And I said, if you can sell me a DX for the price I would pay for a base model, you've got a deal. And the manager said, the problem with you is you're not emotionally involved in buying a car. And I just looked at him. Oh, no, honey, that's not my problem. It's your problem. Well, that was the second place, and we left that, and there was really only one more place left unless we wanted to go like 150 miles, so we were getting kind of desperate. So we went to the third place. They let us test drive a DX because they didn't have the base model on the lot. Who sells the base model? No one wants the base model. And we were driving along. Glenn was driving because he knew how to drive a stick, and I really didn't. I was just driving these cars and learning to drive a stick at the same time. You could hear the salesman wince every time I ground the transmission. So we're driving along, and the salesman said, this has the latest in technology. The brakes are frictionless. And that didn't get a laugh. And you know why? Because you don't have a degree in science like I do. This is not to build myself up. This is just to say that you don't know what friction does, which is fine. Friction is what makes the brakes stop the car. Frictionless is what you get on wet ice when the wheels don't have any friction on the road and you can't stop. When the guy said this car had frictionless brakes, we figured everything else out of his mouth was going to be hooey. We ignored him. I have no idea what else he said. Blah, 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 because I wasn't listening. Then twilight is falling, and he pulls us over to the side of the road, and he pops the hood. It's twilight. There's no sun. And he says, let me point out to you the blah, blah, blah. And I said, it's dark in there. I can't see what you're pointing at. Then he turns to Glenn and he says, well, sir, let me point out to you the blah, blah, blah. And Glenn says, it's dark in there. I can't see what you're pointing at. Besides, what do I know about engines? You turn the key, we hope it goes. Oh, and there's a battery in there. Don't lay a screwdriver across that. I have a degree in science. You shouldn't do that. My physics professor did that. Wow. So the salesman didn't really want to hear that, but I didn't care. So we drove back and we began the negotiations. Dun, dun, dun. Well, I told the guy I was negotiating for a price that included tax, tag, and title, and he looked at Glenn. And Glenn looked at me, and I said, yes, a price including tax, tag, and title. And the salesman said, well, how about $9,000? And Glenn looked at me, and I said, no, I'm thinking more $6,000. And the salesman said, to Glenn, but we don't have the base model on the lot. And Glenn looked at me. And I said, it's all right, we don't mind waiting. And then the salesman said to Glenn, you're noticing a theme here? Yes, so did I. The salesman said to Glenn, well, any car on the lot has rust inhibitor on it. And Glenn looked at me. And I said, well, that's fine. You don't have the car on the lot, so just don't bother putting rust inhibitor on it. Thank you very much. I'm not going to go this little round and round thing. This was down back in the dark ages. Women didn't buy cars. Misogyny, stigma. Hey, I got stigma into this story. Both themes. So I'll just let you picture in your mind, the salesman always talks to Glenn, Glenn always looks at me, and I always answer the question. So the salesman says, well, $6,000, that's pretty low. How about $9,000? And we just went, we can't afford that. So he said, well, I'll go talk to my manager, because that's what they do. And he comes back with another price, and it's still too high. And we say, no, I'm sorry, we can't pay that. And he goes back to his manager, and he comes back, and it's still too high. And I said, well, gee, I guess the other guy at the other place we went to misled us when he said we could buy this car at $6,000 or a little more. I guess maybe we can't afford a new car. I was lying. We desperately needed a new car because we didn't have one working. But, you know, it's a car negotiation. I lie, they lie. I didn't care. So the salesman begins to look alarmed, and he goes back to his manager. He comes back with another price. It's like $7,500. And we said, gee whiz, you know, I'm sorry, we can't afford that. We went back to the manager. By this time, Glenn and I are starting to talk about, you know, well, gosh, maybe we'll have to sell Bessie the cow. We'll have to slaughter all the chickens and live off of them. Sell off the lower 40. Live in an apartment. This is a total lie. We were already living in an apartment. And of course we didn't have a cow or chickens or any of those things. But, you know, the guy comes back and we're talking about, oh, gee whiz, you know, Aunt Sarah didn't leave us that much money. We might have to sell off Bessie the cow. I don't know if we have enough chickens so that we can live off of the meat there. Yeah. So he goes back to his manager, and we're laughing. He can see us laughing, but yeah, I lie, they lie. It's a car negotiation. What's he going to do, take away my birthday? No. So he goes back. A friend of mine says that. He comes back with yet another prize, $6,600. And I'm thinking, well, you know, that's pretty close to $6,000. Then I think, wait, does that include tax, tag, and title like I said I was negotiating for? And he says, no, that doesn't include tax, tag, and title, because he's conveniently forgotten that, because he's a car salesman. So I said, no, not if it doesn't include tax, tag, and title. So he goes back to his manager, and we're laughing about, you know, Jesse the mule, and we're probably going to have to sell off the mule, and we won't be able to afford a tractor anymore. And what will we do without the mule then? I don't know. So he comes back and he says, $6,600, tax, tag, and title included. And we say, yay! Actually, we don't say yay because I was hoping for 6,000, but it was close. We desperately needed a car because the other one had thrown a rod. Okay, we'll take it. And in a little while, we were the proud owners of a 1989 light blue Honda Civic hatchback. And I drove that car for miles. When we broke up, my first divorce, he kept the pickup, which he really wanted. I kept the Honda Civic, which was paid for. I'm not stupid. I only look it. So I drove that car for 225,000 miles, and I might still be driving it today if I weren't so bad on maintenance with cars. You should change your oil. I hadn't changed the oil in like 13,000 miles. And the thermostat decided once again that the engine did not need any coolant running through it. Remember, it didn't have an air conditioning. I'm not talking about air conditioning. I'm talking about the coolant that runs through the engine and keeps it from overheating. The thermostat had clicked shut, and the car overheated, and because it had been 13,000 miles since I changed the oil, the engine block broke. Yeah. It's a perfectly good car, and I broke it. Well, once the engine block breaks, for those of you who don't know, I had to be told by the mechanic, what do I know about engines? You turn the key and you hope it goes. And by the way, there's a battery in it. So he said, well, you could either pay to have it fixed or you could buy a new car and it'll cost about the same. So I sold it for junk and got myself another car. That was my second car. But I really liked my first car better. Aww. Thank you very much.